Block and spacer lifts are fine for full-size trucks. Don't waste your money unless. Well, good afternoon everybody, and welcome back to RobMotive FST, where FST stands for full-size trucks for now. So today I wanted to talk about lifts for full-size trucks. In this case it would be the Ram 1500, but I have had other full-size trucks that I have lifted in the past, primarily Toyota Tundras. I also had a Ram Rebel. Didn't really have a lift on it, but it did have the air suspension, and I have to say I wasn't real impressed with that air suspension. It was too firm, I think, and there were also problems with it, at least early on. I know when it was really cold outside, people would go out and their trucks would be sitting kind of funky because the air had escaped. So I'm not really big on air suspension, so we're not even going to talk about that. I wouldn't recommend it unless, you know, you're towing something or hauling something really heavy and you need that extra oomph. Otherwise, I just wouldn't do it. So before we get into it, real quick, if you haven't before, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and click that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. So what am I talking about? Block and spacer lifts for full-size trucks. You know, in my experience, they are, I'm not going to say better, they're better for your wallet. Because they obviously don't cost as much. A block and spacer lift is simply that. Blocks in the back, spacers in the front. Now, why they're better for full-size trucks really comes down to weight. Full-size trucks are so heavy that even when you put a block and spacer in, they're still gonna ride well on the suspension. Now, don't get me wrong, they are gonna stiffen up. The two that I had put on my Tundras were perfectly fine. I put 2-inch block and spacer lifts on those just to kind of bring it up a little bit, really to add a little bit bigger tire. But they were fine. They rode smoothly. They weren't overly firm, but still noticeable. Now, one thing I want to mention, because it seems a lot of people don't know or don't realize, when you have a lift done of any kind affecting the front end of your truck, you have to have an alignment. It's very important. I mean, unless the shop that you're having it done at is very lucky or marks everything and hopes that it ends up the same when they're done, which I think some shops do just to avoid having to screw around with getting an alignment done, it's not gonna be good. You're gonna have troubles. And I've also noticed, at least in questions or comments from folks that have had lifts done with alignments, they've had troubles. They've had to have 2, 3, 4 different alignments done. It shouldn't be that way. The shop that you're using to do your lift should be using a good quality alignment shop to go ahead and have that work done. So just beware of that. You could have to make multiple trips if the shop that they're using is not good. And that's because most times the shops that do the lift, they have to farm it out. They don't have the equipment or the expertise to do the alignment itself. So when is a block and spacer lift not fine for a full-size truck? Well, there's really 3 instances that I can think of where it really makes any kind of a difference and where you might want to consider going with a suspension lift as opposed to just a block and spacer. You know, where they're going to get in there and replace pieces and parts, add shocks, all kinds of different things. The first is if you are into off-road or extreme off-roading. Obviously, if you're going to be in conditions that are severe, probably better off to go with a suspension lift that is designed more to handle that kind of terrain. I think it's really overkill if you just drive paved or gravel trails once in a while. Maybe you just want the look and you're a mall crawler or a street king and you're never going to be going off-road, then it's overkill. But if you are going to be doing extreme off-roading in conditions that are harsh or severe, a suspension lift is the way to go. It'll be better set up for your truck and better able to handle those conditions and keep you from bouncing and flying around all over inside the truck. Number 2, extreme height. Now, extreme height for me could vary for different people, but I would say extreme height really means anything over 4 inches. maybe even 3.5 inches, anything above that. Because once you get into that kind of a lift, you're gonna start stressing other components that need to be addressed. You know, on a Tacoma that I had a problem with the, on a Tacoma that I had a problem with the CV axle. The angle was changed so severely that it ripped the boot, and all of the fluid, the grease, the lubricant inside that axle came out. It was all over the bottom of my truck. I had a rip in that sleeve, which, by the way, why do we still have that set up? After that happened and I was looking at it, I thought, really? This cheapo, flimsy boot is the only thing that's holding the lubricants, the grease, the oil, whatever in there? Surely after all this time, all the years we've been building vehicles, we'd come up with something better, but it doesn't seem to be so. That setup is very fragile. And when you change the angle, like going above 3.5 inches, you're gonna chance tearing that boot and losing all your fluid. Then it's gonna be dry inside. When you hit four-wheel drive, you're gonna have a non-lubricated joint and you're gonna have troubles. I wouldn't do it. I would definitely go with some sort of a suspension lift if you're gonna go above 3.5 inches. And that's why I think, number one, that size lift is so common, because you don't have to do all the extra stuff. It is cheaper. And two, there's really less liability for the shop. I mean, if you stay at 3 inches, you don't have to worry so much about going bigger and then messing with all kinds of other parts and assuming the liability in doing so. Number three, if you're looking for the absolute best ride quality. In other words, if you want to change the setup, change the wheels and tires, go with something that's bigger, heavier, takes more force to move, is going to provide for a lot more road feel, you probably should go with some sort of a suspension lift if that's important to you. Because obviously, bigger tires, number one, are heavier, and number two, are more aggressive. They're gonna transfer more road feel into the cab, into you, if you don't do something to accommodate them. And I think that's a big reason why the block and spacers do feel a bit firmer and a bit more harsh in a truck, is because most of us, if we're gonna put a lift on a truck, we're gonna put more aggressive tires on. I think they go hand in hand. Those great big tread deep mud type tires, well, it takes something to handle those. And a suspension lift is gonna give you that extra cushion so that you're not the one absorbing all the bumps and feeling it all in the seats. So I think if you're looking for the absolute best ride quality, a suspension lift is always probably the way to go. Anyway, I just wanted to get on here and kind of talk about that a little bit. I get questions on all of the channels about that kind of stuff. I think a block and spacer lift is fine for a full-size truck, really due to the weight and the ride quality that you're going to maintain because of that extra weight. Anyway, leave a comment. Let me know what you think, particularly if you have experienced both. Was it worth spending the extra money for a full suspension lift, or do you think the block and spacer you had originally would have been just fine? I'd be curious to know. Also, real quick, I do have 2 additional channels. Rob Motive, all about the Toyota Tacoma, and Rob Motive JT, all about Jeep Gladiators. Check them out, and if you're interested, why not subscribe? Don't forget, smash that subscribe button and click that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.